The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Ask the Experts Dynamics GP Inventory webinar. Appreciate everybody jumping on here today and spending some time with us, learn some inventory stuff. My name is Brandon Cook, and I'll just be doing a brief intro for Karen today. Just as a reminder, we are using GoToWebinar today. If you have any questions during the webinar, just feel free to drop those into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. We do try to make these webinars as interactive as possible, so if you just want to drop anything inventory related that you have a question on, you can go ahead and drop that in the question panel, and we'll get to that as fast as possible. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you want to go back and rewatch this on our website, the video will be uploaded this week, and you can find that video under the Ask the Experts tab on the events training page on our webinar website. Before I hand it over here to Karen, I'll just go ahead and read our Njevity mission statement. Our mission statement is at the core of what we do here at Njevity, and it's a big part of why we do these webinars. So our mission statement is to improve the life and success of our partners and customers by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. And with that, I'll hand it over to our presenter for this afternoon, Ms. KJ Krueger.
Hey guys, this is KJ, and thanks for popping in for the inventory Ask the Experts. I am going to go through kind of an outline of what I plan to go over, but also while I'm doing that, if you want to submit questions, if you came with questions already that you want to ask, if you can put those in the questions while I'm going over the beginning outline, I can kind of adjust or just make sure that as I go, that I'm touching on that. But then also, absolutely feel free to ask questions as we go, as they come up. So basically what I was going to go over, inventory is such sort of a broad module. There's a lot there. If any of you have spent some time just doing an item setup, you know that that's totally involved, and there's just a lot to do. So I'm going to go through the item setup screens, not in a ton of detail, but I'm going to give you some tips on things that you can do in there, maybe some things that you didn't realize that were there. A lot of times when we've been using GP for a little while, we forget some of the capabilities that are there. And so I'm hoping that some of the things that I go over will trigger some aha moments for you. I'll also be going through the typical things like inquiries and transactions, things like that, just real basic. And then some report stuff. And then also, I want to take a look at some nav lists, because I think, first of all, they're way underused in GP, especially with those of us who have been using it for a while. And that's also really helpful for anybody who's using the GP web client and Power GP online. So like I said, if you have questions as we go, feel free to put those in the panel, and we will be taking time kind of as time goes on to get to those. So I'm going to start, let's see. Can you guys, I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. It says it's showing. So you should see a GP window that's at the home page. And we're going to go to the inventory module. And you can get, I know you guys know this, but there's menus up here that you can use to get there. And so these different windows, if you're used to using these up here, just be aware, these options are available within those menus if that's what you use and that's what you're used to. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about item setups, because this is extremely key to anything that you do in GP with inventory. This is going to inform transactions, how they're going to work, especially in regard to accounting, in regard to your quantities, or maybe you don't want to track quantities, and so I'm going to get into that a little bit. So my item that I'm going to look at is, I'm going to use a t-shirt, and you can see here when I start typing in t-shirt that I obviously tried to type something before that I don't want to use that, and that gets in my way because I never want to select that. So I can right click on that and remove it from list. You can do this from any of your suggested lists when you're entering something. So I'm going to click remove from list, and now that won't show up anymore. but this is what I want to do. This is my men's t-shirt. So it has an M at the end. I did not put a dash in there because just a basic tip, sometimes when you're doing inquiries, if you have your partner write a special view for you, special characters can sometimes get in the way of that, and they can cause problems in some of your reporting. So I tend to stay away from special characters in my item numbers, or if I do use one, I'll use an underscore. So so that's just a little tip with that. Okay, so when you're setting up inventory, you have your basic stuff with descriptions. One of the things that's really useful in inventory are class IDs. And just a quick review of what you can use those for. You can use them, first of all, in reporting. When you're running reports, you can group certain things by class ID or filter by class ID. But something that's really helpful for that also is that you can put all of your information in there for accounting, so that when you're setting up an item, it can automatically put some accounts in there. And when I hit accounts, some of you have manufacturing, some of you don't. If you see a second window pop up here, that's specific to manufacturing. And I'm not going to talk about that today. But if you do have questions about inventory items and accounting, manufacturing, or anything having to do with manufacturing, let us know, put that in the question box, and then I can talk with you offline on that. So basically, I can have all my accounts and everything, and also some other settings in my class ID. And if I assign that class ID, then I can have it automatically fill in with those settings from that class ID. The other cool thing about this is if I go in here and change something in the class ID, I can have an option to roll down that change. So if I go in here for this change, and I click OK on the accounts for this class ID, and I hit save, it's going to ask me, do I want to roll down changes to that, to all the items that are already assigned that class? So that's one way to do a mass item update. That's super helpful. I'm not going to roll that change down, but I could. And that works for the rest of the stuff too here. So those are your basic uses for your class ID. Some important things to note is that once you start using an item number, once you enter an item number, there are some things that cannot change. So once I assign an item type, and this was determined by my class ID when I created it, but once I have an item type assigned, that's something that I can't necessarily change. I can do sales inventory to discontinued, but I think that a lot of times this item type is underused by people. So something that you may have run into, and I have several customers that have said, well, you know, we allow this to go negative because we don't really track inventory on it. We don't purchase it, but now we have negative 5,020,000 in there. Or maybe they don't allow it to go negative and they keep having to go in there and add a bunch of quantities so that as it ticks down, they don't have to keep going in. If you don't want to track quantities on something, you can use your item type to do that. So sales inventory means we are going to track quantities and we are going to track costs, which means when I sell something or when I purchase something, this cost over here is going to get updated. I can move sales inventory to discontinued. That will mean I can't buy it anymore. I can do adjustments. I can do variances, and I can do sales transactions. But I cannot, well, there's a setting for that. So you can set it to not do that. But basically, you don't want to accumulate these anymore. Kits are, it's an item that won't track quantities for the item number that is a kit. And it will track costs. But when you do transactions with a kit, it's actually going to change it to whatever items are in the kit. So you would make a list of, you would have a kit ID, and you could use that to sell a group of other items, but it's going to track all your quantities and your costs and everything for those items as those items. So that's a little bit different than an assembly. If you wanted to if you wanted to absorb everything into it, then you would use a bill of materials and an assembly instead. Miscellaneous charges. This is one that's one of my favorites because with this one, it doesn't track quantities and it doesn't track current costs. So if you have to do purchase orders for something, if your company says you have to have a purchase order for everything, but you don't want it, it's not a stock thing where you're going to be tracking it, and you might actually use the item number, maybe it's just miscellaneous as the item number, then it won't change the cost every time you order it. You can change the description and you can use it for whatever you want. It's not going to drive anything negative. It's not going to matter. Services, those are going to track your current costs, but not your quantities. So you think of it, it's not something that you would have on hand. It's just something, but that's going to track a cost. So it will keep track of that current cost. Flat fee is the same thing as services. It's just they basically work exactly the same. It's just something that can help you if you need that to be differentiated. Okay, are there any questions so far?
Yeah, it looks like there are a couple questions.
Okay, what do we got?
So the first one is, I know when it comes to units of measure, it's recommended to get it right at the beginning, but if that didn't happen, what is the best way to clean that up? I have over 100 schedules.
Wow, okay, so that's perfect because I was gonna go over unit of measures next, because that's another thing, again, you wanna pick right the first time, right? And you're running into an issue there where, that a lot of people actually run into. There are some utilities in here where you can change your decimal places, you can change your valuation, that sort of thing. For your unit of measure schedule ID, there are, you can't change, okay, let me back up. If there's sometimes when you change decimal places or change your valuation where it's actually going to blank that out. It's going to blank out your unit of measure schedule and a couple other things. So you might try doing that if you're changing decimal places. They don't have a specific thing that changes this here. But the other thing that I suggest to do if you don't want to go through a big rigmarole, because this a lot of times is going to be a big problem, there is a tool where you can change your item number. And so a lot of times what I suggest customers do is change your item number of your existing item, and you can tack something on the end like a Z, but I would leave the item numbers the same, but tack something on the end of it to say that it's discontinued. I would discontinue it, make it inactive. And then I would create a new item number that has the settings that you want. This way you can run reports on both. If you have transactions or if you have inventory, obviously you're gonna have to take it out from the original item number and put it back in. But honestly, the easiest way to make sure that there aren't any problems with the transfer over and that you don't miss anything is to put something to change this item number. And the place that you do that is, you can go into your professional services tools library, which is down here. Sometimes it'll be in your home screen and you'll see it in your list up here. But your professional services tools library, and not everybody has access to this, so you might have to talk to an administrator on your site, but you can go on there and you can combine items. They have to have some of the same attributes if you're gonna do that. So what I'm suggesting, more than likely you're not gonna be able to combine, but you can modify the number. And so when you do that, it's going to bring up a screen that tells you this is what my original item number is, this is what I want it to be. And then you can, then all your history will stay there because you still have that item there, but then you have a clean slate to start with your new one. And then obviously you would do transactions to take out any inventory and move it back in under that item number. Is there anything else?
Yes, we do have one other question. So
Okay.
What is the best practices for changing / replacing item numbers?
Okay, well, I just showed you the change in the item numbers, and that's a pretty simple one. Actually, what I didn't show you, I should have shown you this. Usually they have, and I'm not completely sure. Just so you guys know, while I'm pulling this up, they also have these kinds of tools for vendors and customers as well. They have them in the general menus for those. So if I do if I'm doing an item modification, so they have an import here. You can use a CSV file, and you can have a first column being the starting item number and the second column being the new item number, and you can click validate, and it'll let you know if there's any problems with the item numbers that you have in your list, and then you can click import. Always, 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 before you ever do any of this, make a backup of your data. Always, always, without fail, always have a backup. And when in doubt, always make a backup. But so yeah, so you can import an entire list. So that would be, to me, if I had somebody that wanted to, update their item numbers, that would be where I would have them do that. And what was the other thing, Brandon? It was updating items and what else?
Oh, we're replacing them.
Replacing them. Okay, so again, you can't, if you have transaction history in there, You can't delete an item. And I wouldn't suggest removing history, although you could down in utilities, but I wouldn't do that unless it's something that, you know, you're just getting started and you don't need it. I don't know, but for auditor purposes, probably not a good idea. But you can discontinue an item. So when you're done with it, you can put it to discontinued if you have quantities in there that you still want to use up, and then you won't be replenishing those quantities. And then when you're finished, you can click inactive. And when it's inactive, there are settings that will make it so that it's not in your item list here in your lookup. So you can help keep things uncluttered that way. Okay, so again, unit measure schedule ID, let me talk about that a little bit more. It's really important that you determine, especially if you're using assemblies or if you're using, you know, decimal places or different measurements for something, that you set up your unit of measure schedule ID and that you think of that ahead of time. Here is an each unit of measure schedule ID, and we have a case of 10 and a case of 25, which means when my item is assigned this, it also gets limited to the decimal places quantity that is set in my unit of measure schedule ID. So that is determined here. The other thing that you want to do is, if you're going to be measuring in, there are a lot of times if you do measurements in, you know, liquid or you know, length or whatever, you're going to want to make sure that whatever your main unit of measure is going to be what you track in your system. So here, I want to track each. I can buy a case of 10. So on my purchase order, I can put a case of 10 on there. But when it comes in, when I receive it, it's going to put it into inventory as 10 each. And when I use it in bills and materials, I want to use it in each. So you really want to put some planning into your unit of measure schedule IDs. And again, now once an item's set up with the unit of measure schedule ID, I can add something to this. Like I can say a case of 50 is here. Oh yeah, this is good for you to see. So it's saying, do I want to continue to add this and update the items that it's assigned to? So it's warning me, hey, if you do this, you've got items here that are going to be updated. When I click save, it's going to go through my items that are assigned to that, and it's going to make sure that that is now available to them. I can now do transactions in cases of 50 for those. Okay, you've got your standard cost and your current cost. I'm not going to cover standard costs today. That would involve a little bit more. But current cost is going to get updated when you're doing transactions. Like if I buy it, if I do a purchase order for an inventory item, the current cost is going to get updated at the time of the receipt and then again at the time of the invoice. So nothing happens when you've done the purchase order. But this will be pulled into the purchase order if I don't have anything set up for my vendor. And I'll kind of show you that in a minute. I'm going to go to the options screen now. This has a couple of things that are pretty cool. First of all, you got substitute item 1 and 2. I don't have any customers that use this right now, but basically what these do, these are where you would put something where, let's say you're doing a sales transaction and you don't have anything in stock. These will, you can have it suggested that they use these other items. So those are suggestions that will actually pop up. There are other places where you can put substitute items, but then those are just for referral, not for actual suggestions. So people would have to go and look for those. Lot numbers. If you want to track by lot numbers, there's some really cool things you can do with this. And you can add a lot category with that, which means you can put in different attributes. So I can say for this lot category, and I'm going to add this in a little bit, but for this lot category, I want to have, let me look at, I'll open it up. I want them to be able to put in for clothing, the size and the color of the clothing. Oops. And so those things, and you can assign, you can create many of these. So you can say for this lot type, I want them to put these in, and then those categories or those will go along with the lot numbers. Along with lots, you can have the system warn you however many days before a lot expires. If you want to do that, you can put in shelf life. These are user defined, which can be really helpful. So on here, that's this is kind of the main place. Typically lot numbers or serial numbers is the other thing you can track here. and that's where that gets assigned. Do I have any questions now on the options?
Not on options. There was just one follow-up from the previous one, but I don't know if you want to say.
Okay.
Just talking about how they use ABC 1, 2, 3, and they wanted to change it to 1, 2, 3 ABC. That was for the back before.
For the, what are we talking about again? Where?
The last question we answered, the second one about changing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Use item ABC 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's where you're gonna go. You're gonna go to that professional. I'm just gonna leave this open because my mouse it's tiny. Okay, so that's when you're gonna go here to your professional services tool library. And again, if you don't see this in your options, it may be on your home page in your panel right here, or it may be that you need to talk to administrator to do that, because this has some dangerous stuff in there. If just anybody can get to it, they can really mess you up. So a lot of times this will be limited to just administrators. But what you can do is you could do an item number modifier down here in the inventory tools. And I would put ABC 1, 2, 3 in this first one. It doesn't exist. All right, I'm gonna use my t-shirt one. Is my t-shirt thing still open? I'm gonna close that. No. Okay, so we're gonna change, my item number was t-shirt M, and I just wanna change it to t-shirt. And I click convert. It tells me I should run a backup. I'm comfortable with this, it's okay. But always, 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 always run a backup before you do anything like this. Violation of primary key. All right, it's not letting me, so that was a bad example. But basically, this will allow you to change those item numbers. It keeps all the history, but it just has the new item number in there. And again, if you have an entire list, you just have to have 2 columns. The first column will have your starting item number. That would be ABC 1, 2, 3. And down here, the second column would be where you'd put 1, 2, 3 ABC. Okay. Okay. One other thing with the options. In here, let me pull up that t-shirt. Let's see if I sufficiently messed things up. Okay, so it's still in there as the M. So when I go to options, you'll notice that I can't click on this dropdown. The reason that I can't do that is that I've already done transactions with this and I have inventory in stock. You can change whether an item is lot number tracked or not after you've done, you're gonna need the help of your partner probably, but after you've done your, after you've done transactions with it, you wanna make sure that all the inventory is taken out of stock first. If you can't have any open transactions and you can't have any inventory in stock. Once you do, then you can change it. And I'll show you there is a way that you can move inventory out and in without risking hitting the GL. And I'll show you the easy way to do that as well. That probably will answer some questions about, hey, what if I don't want to mess with my GL, but I have to update my inventory quantities? So I will show you that. All right, so in keeping with lot attributes, actually I'm going to show you this. So right now I don't have any lot category assigned, but I do have stock in here. And so I got some quantities on hand. And so I want to go look at those lot numbers, and I forgot to put in some of the lot information for some of them. Under utilities, there is a little thing called edit lot number attributes. So after I posted it, after they're already in here, I can go into my t-shirt. I can find my lot number that I want to change. And here, they put in an expiration date. So I'm going to put an expiration date of, actually, they think it's 2027. So I'm just going to say, just use the calendar here. 31, oh, it's 2020. So it's going to show, here's my warning that it's expired. So I'm going to click process. And now when I go into that, anytime I see that, I'm going to see that expiration date. You will also notice that it didn't have any attributes that I had in there. I have quantities in there, but if I have stuff that I want to start tracking some attributes for, I can add my attributes, and then I can go in here in my lot number attributes. Oops. TSH. There we go. And I pull my lot number, and now, oh, it's still not letting me. Did I save it? I might not have saved my number. Hang on real quick. Save. Now let's try it. Let's hope this worked. It worked earlier. There we go. So now I can put in my size and color. So even though those weren't there or assigned to the item when I received it in, I can change it when it's in stock. I can change it. So any of you that wanted to add attributes to your lots, you can do that. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yes, we do have one. Can I change whether or not we track lot numbers on an existing item?
Yep, and that's the one where you're gonna have to, like I said, you can't change it here, but you're gonna have to go in, you're gonna have to take out any items that are in stock. You're gonna change, any open transactions and any items in stock. So you would do adjustments out, and then you can change this drop down becomes available, and then you can change it, and then you'll wanna put back any item quantities. And let me just show you right now while I'm on that, how to do that without affecting your GL. So if you need to make adjustments to your inventory, or let's say you want to go change something to a lot tracked or not lot tracked, I can go in when I'm doing an inventory transaction. I'm going to start from my transaction entry screen because that's where most people do. So I start entering a batch here. Nope, that batch is already there. Okay, so I'm going to add the batch. When I get in here, you'll see that there's a little checkbox here that says post to general ledger. I can create a batch, and this is much better than, some of you might be aware of how to change posting settings. I would not do that. I would come in and I would create a batch and I would uncheck this box. So any transaction using this batch is not going to post anything to the general ledger. So then when I bring my quantities out, I'm going to create a batch. I'm going to post that batch not to the general ledger. I'll go change my lot number so that it tracks or it doesn't track. Serial number works the same way. And then I'll come back in, I'll create another batch, not have it posted to the general ledger, and that's when I can bring things back in. So that's a really helpful one when you're doing adjustments and stuff and you think, hey, we made the GL match. You don't have to affect the GL. Oh, hang on. I didn't save that. So let's get out of here. Okay, so we went through lot attributes. We'll go back to our item. All right, that suggest items here, that's, remember in options we had this substitute items. The suggest items is not exactly the same. Actually, this is, okay, I got turn around. Okay, the suggest items is when you want, let's say you have sales and you want to sell, I'm going to use cars. Let's say you're selling a car. You want the salesperson to say, hey, let's give you this warranty, we'll sell you this warranty, or we'll sell you this other option. You can put suggested items in here. So if I was selling t-shirts, maybe I want to say, hey, I suggest you get a scarf or a matching hat or whatever. Those would come up and say, hey, do you want to suggest to the customers these things? That's what suggested items are. Accounts we talked a little bit about when we were doing the class ID. These are my manufacturing accounts. These top 4 accounts, if you don't have accounts associated with your items, I highly suggest that you put accounts with your items. And the reason for that is these top 4 are the main ones that you're going to want to have. When you do a transaction, that transaction is going to first look back here and say, what account am I going to use? If it doesn't find it here, it might look back. If you're doing purchasing, it would look to the vendor. If you're doing sales, it would look to the customer. But these 4 things can, especially when you get down the line in purchasing and things like that, if you don't have these accounts here, it can cause you some real problems and make you have to undo some things that you've already done. So that, and we all know that people who do transactions aren't always the same people who understand accounting. One cool thing about these is that if you have an account segment that's associated with a site ID, then you can associate that account segment with the site ID, and any transactions that are done to that site ID will replace whatever segment that is with the site ID segment that's associated. So if I had this last segment assigned to a site ID and I maybe brought inventory into that site, it would use these first 2 segments and then it would change this last segment to whatever goes with that site. So that can be really helpful. All right, any questions after that?
Not right now.
All right. Okay, well, we'll move on. So we're going to go to now, I want to point one other thing out. List price here, you'll notice that it's grayed out. If you're using multi-currency, this will be grayed out. If you're not, you'll be able to put your list price in here. With multi-currency, the way to do that is to go up here to your go to item currency, and you can put your list price right here. You pick your currency and you put your list price right here. That comes in handy when you do sales price options that are based on your list price. Okay, so as you go through the item setups, those are the main things for accounting and for how the transactions handle your item. We also have price lists. This is extremely important. You can't do a sales transaction for an item without having price lists in here. Even if you don't have, multiple prices for something, you do have to have something set in here. So you'll see in here that I entered some pricing information. You have to say, do you want to do all quantities? How do we want to do this? Do we want to just charge them a currency amount, or do we want to do a percent of list price or markups or margins? One thing that a lot of people don't know about in here is that you can, if you're using, well, any of these really, from here you have some options that you can do. You can tell it that you can do, for selling, I want to sell in only whole amounts or whole and fractional. Let me bring up a different item to explain this a little bit better. So this is a service item, and they're going to, the price method that they're using is a percent of markup of current cost. So that's what they're putting in here. And when I go to options, you can see that they're allowing for whole and fractional. And there's also a way you can put rounding policies. So I could say, I always want to, whatever my calculation is here with my percentage that I'm charging, I always want to round up. And I can do it in multiples, or I can say it ends in, and then I would put, I want it to end in, I can round it up to the nearest dollar. So this section, I can make sure, I can also say it ends in at like the nearest 5 cents. So this is really helpful for if you're wanting to kind of make sure your sales prices that go out are more controlled, and your units of measure. I didn't make any changes, but I'm going to save. All right, so that's brief on price lists. There are some things that you can do. There's a utility for price lists, and this is kind of cool, and I'm just going to show it to you, and if you want to play with it, go into a test company and play with it. You can go in here and you can do all sorts of things with your price lists, and this will walk you through a wizard that would do that. So for those of you who have a big long price list, that might be something that could get rid of some of the headaches for you. Okay, any questions now?
Not at the moment.
Okay, great. So that's kind of the sales side. I'm gonna talk a little bit about purchasing and just inventory, what you're controlling in here. So these are all, I always use the go-to menu when I'm setting up an item, because I make sure I don't miss anything, right? I don't use my menus in here. I use this because I just go down the row and then I'm sure that I got everything. So my quantity sites, you have to have a site ID associated with an item in order to use it, because that's where it's going to store it. It's going to have your quantities. So there are a ton of site IDs that they have in this company, but basically my warehouse is my main site ID. And so you can see in here that on hand I have 1,000 t-shirts. I don't have anything allocated to anything. That would mean maybe I have a sales order where, or an inventory transaction where I've allocated some of the lots. So I can look at it by site ID, or I can look in all of my sites to see what the totals are. And then I can go from there and see what different sites have different things. I can get to a planning window where I plan my stock, my minimum stock quantities, things like that from here. But I am going to just continue to use my drop down so that I don't miss anything. My purchasing, this you don't really have to go into if you don't have any kind of variances that, like if you don't want to have any tolerances set or anything like that, you really don't have to do that. I hadn't noticed that I did the case 50 like that. Here are my purchasing options for my different units of measure that are in here available to this item. The one thing I wanted to point out here is that you can put in manufacturer's item numbers here. So if you use several manufacturers, this can be useful. You can make one of them the primary. and then you can put in their item number and their description so that that's available to you. And that's in the purchasing window. So vendors, if you want to purchase from a vendor, this is very similar to the site IDs. You can't purchase from a vendor unless the vendor is associated with the item number. When you have a vendor associated, then you can put the vendor's item number here and the vendor's description. That way it doesn't have to be the same as yours. And then you have the options on purchase orders, whether you want to show the vendor item or your item on your purchase order. You've got all kinds of different planning things that you can do here so that when you purchase from this vendor, you have options here. One thing to note is you have a planning lead time that does not change. You put this in here and it will make calculations and suggestions based on that. Your average lead time and your receipts are going to change as you do transactions with this vendor in the system. Okay. All right, so that's purchasing and vendors. Your item resource planning, that's when I said you could get there from the button in your quantity sites. We're going to skip, we've skipped history. I don't really use this window, to be honest. You can manually enter some things like some projected quantities and things like that in here. You can also you can enter some historical, you can actually hand enter in here. But honestly, I use inquiries and reports and smart lists more than I ever use the history window. I really don't use that window. But if you wanted to find out more about that, you can let me know and we could go through it. Your item resource planning is where you're going to put things in here per site ID. So maybe you have different planning requirements, maybe you have different locations, and this is where you're going to put that information in. And so you can put your default values in here. When you assign a new site ID, it would carry those over. But basically you put your site ID in here and your options for that site ID. And then when you're doing, and I'm not going to go through PO generator. I am willing to talk to people about that offline, but you can have something where it uses these attributes to suggest and even create purchase orders for you. So that's resource planning. Fulfillment, detail, and item engineering data are really for manufacturing, so I'm not going to touch on that. Alternate items, this is the one that's really similar to when you had your options and you had your substitute items up here, but you can put alternate items for this item here, but it's just a list for people to refer to. It's not going to take any action. It's not going to do anything. And nothing automatically fills substitute items. It will only suggest when it's in here, okay? So that's our basic item setups. And those are, I mean, those of you who have used this know that if you have a setup that's just a little bit off, it can throw a lot of things off. So that's why I went into so much detail in all of that, because it's a pretty big deal to get those correct. And it can be really difficult to change. Do you have any questions at this time on those?
Not right now.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's go to, I think I'm gonna go to nav lists, navigation lists. These are a little bit newer, so a lot of people who've been in GP for a while don't use these very much, but these are super, super cool, and I'm going to show you why. So on your left, when you've clicked on a module, on your left, you'll see lists. This top thing is always going to take you back to your main screen. The next ones down are going to show you lists. So right here, I have my items list. And what's cool about this is from here, I could make this my home. If I deal with inventory a lot, I can do a new item from here. I can do a transaction from here, a variance transaction. When I click on this, I can see all these other things that I can do. So I can use this as a menu for transactions. I can filter. I can say I don't want to see items that are discontinued in this list. And then when I select an item, so let's do my t-shirt, I have all kinds of other options that light up here. One of the things I can do is I can delete an item from here. The other thing, not just one, but if I have several items that I want to do something with, I can mark those three and I can inactivate those. So it's really cool. I can use filters here, filter to a certain amount, and then I can check all of them if I want to, and then I can do something up here with all the ones that are checked. So there's all kinds of things you can do as far as activity with those items. Maybe I have a new site and I don't want to use the site tool. It's real easy to unassign or assign a site through this. The other thing that I think is super, super cool here is, let's say I've got just a couple items that I want to take a look at I don't want to run a full stock status report or a full turnover report. So I want to select these 3 and I just want to see stock status on these. This is going to allow me to do that. So if you've got a lot of inventory, you know what a pain it can be to go into that report writer and say, oh, only this range, or you have to run it one at a time because they're not in order of, you know, you can't do a whole range that would include these. This is where you can do that, okay? So, and I'll show you the stock status and the turnover here in a moment. From here, you also have go-tos. I can send to Excel from here. If I deselect these, it gives me more options. I can view transactions for it, which will take me to an inquiry screen. I can view the items, quantities and sites. So it'll take me to all of these inquiry screens for that item. So I can really treat this as my home page. It's super cool. I can see the pricing for it, all of that. And then I can export the entire list to Excel if I want to. Sometimes this doesn't have all the columns I want, so I can save this as a different name. It'll show up over here, and then I can customize it. Once I save it as a different name, there will be an option down here to customize it, and I won't go through that. But this is for your lists. These all kind of work the same. You'll have different options up here and different columns, but they all kind of perform the same way, and it's just a super cool way to be able to do things more quickly and efficiently. Any questions on nav lists? Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you, and I'm going to show you it from here, but you can also see it. Let's see, I want to pick a different number. I'm going to pick this. This is awesome. This is available in web client, all those things. This is called all-in-one view. You can do this with vendors. You can do this with customers. I'm going to show you with inventory. You can see your quantity in transactions here for this item. I could limit this to a site ID if I wanted to. I've also got my document numbers. And what I can do here is I can say, I want to look at everything that's associated with receipt 1200. And it's going to limit over here what I'm going to see. So this is my quantity in. If I've got a quantity out transaction that I want to look at and see other things that are related, here's something that's also related to that. So it's really cool. You can see a bunch of things here and then drill down and see specifics on those. You've got filters up here. You've got sorts here. So it's a really cool tool that's a little bit newer, so a lot of people don't use it. All right, so that's nav lists. I'm going to go into some inquiries here, and I'm just going to touch on a few that are really super helpful. The favorite here that I don't know, a lot of times people will go to item transaction to check out transactions. Receipts is awesome because you can go into an item number and you can see everything that happened here without for just this item number, and you can see you know, a date range if you want. You can see what's on hand available. It's sort of like doing a stock status report and seeing how you got to where you're at. And I'll go over stock status. I also want you guys to see historical stock status. But this is a really super cool. The receipts screen is like 90% of the time will get you the information that you need. The transaction screen, you have to pick what kind of transaction it is, and it's only inventory transactions. So like I said, that receipts, this is not just PO receipts, this is everything. So receipts could be an adjustment in, it could be a variance in, okay? Item transaction it's showing you your adjustment receipts as well, but it's giving you a little bit more detail. I still like the receipt screen better because it's showing you your totals, and it's giving you a little more information on your stock status. And then your item inquiry, anybody who can't edit items can certainly go here and take a look and see, you know, what your quantities are on hand, where they're allocated, and you can drill down as well to see, we've got 30 allocated here. I can click on here and I can see where they're allocated. So these are all my documents they're allocated to. Another couple things that are super cool on inquiries are if you use lot numbers, you can go to the lots inquiry screen. You can put in the item number and see, let's see, do I have anything? You can see if they've been allocated. So you can see how many you have on hand. You can see what you received. it's showing you that you have it on hand, and it will tell you you have this many allocated out of what you've received, and this is how many that have gone out. Quantities sold could be transferred out as well. It's just basically your total that you brought in less what you've allocated and less what you brought out, and then it'll tell you what's available here. So if you show some discrepancies in what you have available, this is a great place to go. If you are doing lot or serial numbers and you want to have traces, this is a great screen. Just make sure that you pick what you need to do here first. A lot of times people ignore this little drop down. So you can say, I want to find certain lot numbers that were shipped to a customer of mine, or it's got recall options so that you can see what serial numbers were shipped to customers. And if you're using manufacturing, this is great, or assemblies, because you can link lot numbers during those transactions to the finished good, and this will actually give you backward visibility so that you can see where a component item had gone. So that's a super cool one. You can see item allocation here. So go from your items and you can see where things are allocated. Let's see, item stock. I don't use these a lot because I use reports for these, but you can see where your total stock is and what the balance is, and what caused that, what brought it there. The thing that I use most for that kind of thing, though, you can do a stock status report. I'm going to hit on reports. Oh, wait, are there any questions on inquiries? Sorry, I just keep moving ahead.
No, you're good.
All right. Awesome, thanks. All right, so reports. I have a bit of a dislike for most GP reports. I love smart lists. I love smart list builder because you can create sort of, the queries that you want to do. However, some of these are really, really helpful. So your item reports, most of these I will use smart list for. It's kind of cool to be able to get your price list and your price list options from these. So these two might be useful to you. Let's see, really my items, I really don't use these reports much. What I do use a lot, your serial lots reports are exactly that. You can see what your serial number and lot numbers are. But again, I use queries for that mostly. They don't have a lot of good smart lists for serials or lots, but if you are looking for something like that where you just don't have enough available to you through smart lists, put in a question in there, because I've got some queries and stuff that I've created that might be useful for you that you can create a smart list from. So put in a question just that you'd like some of those sent to you, or you'd like me to contact you, and I'll get in touch with you about that. The activity ones, these are super cool. So the ones that I want to go through are the stock status and your historical stock status. This one's the best. So your stock status, I always go from here to print because I always want to make sure that my destination is going to screen. But your stock status is going to give you a list of all the things that you have, what their value is. If they have different prices, then it'll break those out. And so that's great if you need it for today, right? You can have it put in your serial lot numbers. You can have it include or not include your negative or zero quantities. So that can be a really useful report. The historical stock status, let's say my GL doesn't match my inventory. That can be frustrating. Or I need to figure out where my inventory quantity came from because I have no clue how the numbers ended up like they did. I can put an as of date. So I want to see what the stock status was as of February 28th, 2027, because right now it's April of 2027. And I'm just going to include my warehouse. And it's you have all your options that you can choose down here. I'm going to make sure it's going to screen, and it's actually going to ask me again because it's set to ask. And here, it's going to print a big long list apparently, and I can see what my stock status is. Now, if you take a look at this item, you can see my current quantity. So as of right now, I have one in stock. But when it was February 28th, I didn't have any in stock. This is going to backtrack you to get to your quantity. So let me find one that's a little bit more here. So right now we have 0, or I'm sorry, as of 2/28/2007, we had 0. We started our current quantities right here at 10. And this is going to say, and it's going to be kind of wonky or feel kind of wonky because I received in 10, but what that's doing is taking away from my quantity now, because since I received them, it bumped this quantity up. So it's kind of doing the opposite to get me back to my quantity at in February. So if I can say, well, I need to see what happened between February and now to get us to the quantity that's here, I can run this report and this is going to tell me everything that happened. I love this report. It's awesome because then I can also see, I can put any date in here and I can see what was my inventory on that date. So if you're not using that, and it's really helpful. It's awesome. All right. Oh, and a couple other cool ones that I like is under analysis, my turnover report. This can be helpful for inventory planning. So it's going to screen, cool. So here it's going to tell me my average inventory, quantity received year to date. You've got annual turns and number of turns calculated here. So if that's something that's useful to you, this report is extremely useful. It's also going to give you, I don't know, what did it do for this one? Why did it give you a second one? Not sure why I did a second one. I might be doing one per warehouse or per site ID. So that's the turnover report. Love that one. And then I also really like the, let's see, gross requirements report. This is going to tell you what you have available. So we have a shortage. This is just going to go through and tell you shortages and what requirements you have. I think there's a second one. I thought there was a second one that printed, but maybe not. So, okay. So that one, that gross requirements is cool. If you are using assemblies, you can see assembly documents here. This is under the inquiry. These are only going to be ones that it's limited to things that are released. I don't believe it shows them if they aren't released. So just as, but if you wanted to see history, you could see things that you already posted. Unposted would be here. So not a lot of people use assemblies, but if you are, this view is helpful. Okay, so we've covered as far as, oh, any questions on the reports?
No, you're good.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to transaction entry real quick because I missed something I wanted to do, and I know I've gone a long time. Thanks for sticking with me, but this is awesome. This is one of my favorite things. When I go in here, I have users that are entering transactions, and I don't want them touching my account numbers because our account numbers are kind of weird, and so it makes me nervous, so I don't want them doing that. What I can do is I can set up what's called a reason code, and there's a setting in inventory where you can force it so that they have to put in a reason code before they can get out of the line item. So if I put in my t-shirts and I want to pull those out, if I want to enter a reason code, I can say, okay, was it damaged? Why am I taking these out? It's damaged, it's expired, was it a QA thing? You can also do this for things you bring in. So you can create whatever reason code you want. When you have a reason code, you tell it, I want this to be available when they're doing adjustments or variances or both. You can tell it if you want it for only increases or decreases or both. Then you put the offset. This is the power in here. So I don't want my people trying to figure out what account to use when it's damaged because they don't need to think about that, and I don't want them to have to waste their time anyway. So they can just pick my reason code, and then that's going to put the account in for me right there. And I can control where that gets to be used. So that can be super powerful. And like I said, you can make that a requirement. So that takes away some of your issues with accounts, trying to figure out why is my account not matching, or why don't I have, we had so much scrapped and I know all this scrap isn't in this account. So those are awesome. Love those. All right, so utilities, reconciling inventory, backup, backup, backup. I'm just going to say that again, make a backup. You can go in here, and what this is going to go through is going to go through all the inventory, transactions, sales, anything having to do with an item or a group of items, and it's going to true it up. So sometimes you might have your quantities that don't match what you think they should be, or the transactions, the reports aren't showing right. If there's something wonky with an inventory item detail information, then you can do one item if you want. You can do a range of items, and then you can include item history if you want, or you cannot. It's up to you. But here is where you would put that in. So I can say I want to do t-shirt M to t-shirt M. I have to spell it right. And I can click process, and it's going to go through, and then it's going to tell me what it did. So it didn't have any adjustments. I just created this recently, so it's not going to have anything, but it's going to give me all the list of anything that might apply and what it fixed. Again, we talked about changing valuation, and the valuation is it first in, first out? Is it perpetual, or first in, first out? Is it standard? Any of these. You'll see that it's grayed out. I can go in here and change valuation, okay? But there are things that I'm going to need to worry about. If I ever have a question about that, one thing, and this is true for most, if not all, windows in GP, is you can click on Help and go to About This window, and it brings this up. It's going to tell you, before you do this, you need to consult your tax advisor, because it could have legal issues, and this is what this is going to do. Then I can go to the Fields button here, and I can see everything in here. It's alphabetized, what that field does. So when I'm setting up an item, if I forget, like, you know, if I'm doing my planning attributes or whatever, I can go in here and I can see all of those. Sorry, Help, About This window. I can see all my fields, what they mean. If I don't remember what my item types do, I can see all these here. Quantities are tracked, quantities aren't tracked. So super helpful window. And that's, again, available to almost all windows, I think, in GP. There are a couple where it's add-ons that might not have them. So here you can change a range of item numbers. You can change things to be a different valuation. Just be aware that you'll want to check with somebody before you do that. Changing decimal places, same kinds of things, but it's going to clear. Remember I said some of this is going to clear your unit of measure schedule out. So if you want to clear your unit of measure schedule, and it's not going to let you, you just want to be really careful. But you can change your decimal places here. It is going to clear things out, and you're going to have to go back in and put those things in. There are some useful tips in this About This window for this. It'll tell you what it's going to affect and what you might have to go back in and do. But those are utilities, and again, you don't want to make this available to just anybody. It's typically going to be with an admin, and you want to be real careful, and you always want to back up. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? I know I ran the full hour. You guys are great for hanging in. If I didn't touch on a question that you had, or if you have more questions, specific questions, whatever that you want to contact us with, I'm not sure, Brandon, is there an email they can respond to, or you can always contact support@njevity.com. Mm-hmm. But Brandon, is there another way for them to ask questions?
There's info@njevity.com as well.
There you go. And so I'm not the only person here that knows inventory. We have some amazing consultants here, and I'm blown away by their knowledge all the time, and we help each other out all the time, and there's so much to know that there will be stuff I don't know that they will. So send in your questions. I'm happy to answer manufacturing specific questions, you know, any kind of, you know, anything we didn't touch on here that has to do with another module, or, you know, different kinds of costing, then definitely send them in and we will get back to you. So I think that's all. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Take care.